Thank you all for coming today. Call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. Can I get an approval of meeting minutes for July 7th, 2014?
Second.
Any changes, edits?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think the
Alderman Grover.
name of our library director was misspelled in the minutes. So it's just,
Great. Any other changes?
that's all I had.
With that change, can, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So we have citizen comment, but I believe we are going to do citizen comment in conjunction with the items for discussion. Ms. Esther, I see your hat, but are you, what item, HH1? Oh, thank you. Would you, oh, would you like to do citizen comment now, or do you want to do it? Please,
No, I'll do them now because
Great.
there are some questions, and that might help you with your debate to answer them or to explain them, whatever.
Great, thank you.
Especially for the HH1 Human Service. You're talking about the committee that you're going to have a meeting on September the 29th. And I wanted to know, will that meeting be open for public comments and things at that meeting?
I believe we have not made the meeting agenda for that yet, but at almost all meetings, there would be opportunity for citizen comment. So I can't imagine that we would not have citizen comment.
Okay, that's good. The thing with the citywide grant fund, the documents in there, the spreadsheets and things in there where it talks about the amount of funds and especially with the general fund revenue, the community development and the library, all of those, and they come up with a total as to what the amount for 2013 was, which was 46 million and something, I forgot. And they said in that total was the fire and police fund. But then when you add up the numbers up there before, the subtotal that you have does not add up with the numbers that is listed for the 1 million something for the general fund, the 6 million plus for the community development, the library, and the other, I think it was 4 or 5. There is a more or less a 44,789 different. So in there, there's a difference. You have 60,576. But when I added them up 3 times, I came up with $9,111,058. $58. So there's a difference. So are those numbers out of sync? Are there some other numbers in there that should be? So what is that missing 30,000 supposed to cover?
Yeah. Yes, I was waiting for her to stop speaking.
But
And-
that was the only 2 with the grants.
I'm sorry, say again?
That was all with those 2.
Great. So we will have staff look into that and have explanations at that meeting on the 29th.
Okay. You can discuss it and I'll come back with the others.
Do you,
Or did you want me to go ahead with all of them?
whatever you so choose.
Okay. H4, with the medical marijuana, I talked to the company, and I forgot the gentleman's name, Alzheimer's. And we had a nice conversation, have an idea of what they're doing, who they are, and what they will be doing, and the taxes and things that will be paid, who will be paying it, and everything. But when you hopefully when they get up and talk about themselves, that they explain to the community exactly who they are, when they started, what they're planning on doing and stuff in the community, and what their background is. Since this does say is supposed to be for medical marijuana. So evidently, the doctor is going to be writing a prescription that says this person can have maybe only a certain amount or whatever. So that need to be made clear and explained to the community. I hope they will do that when they come up and stuff. The other one I have, which deals with the police report, well, the other two, I have two things. One is with the police report. I know that it's not on here. Alderman Breakaway had asked the chief about the reports when he gave the reports of the number of stops and frisks that they had done, and he asked for a breakout. I asked Alderman Breakaway, did he get that information from the chief, and that was not given. I did get some information from the chief, and it broke out suspicious activity, gang activity, other activities, and traffic-related activities. We have, with the Citizen Network Protection, we have been looking at, and we had talked to the chief about this in 2012, that this is verge on the borderline, very close to racial profiling. Since we do not know what the other is, the other can only say, since the majority of those people that were stopped in the other category was African American, that was definitely a category that we can say is racial profiling, because you did not give me a reason why. If they wasn't suspicious or they didn't have gang activity and it wasn't a traffic, the only other reason you had to stop that person was because he was black. So I'm still waiting for that information and other information which has not come forth yet. And the other one, I'll ask the city manager this one, and he can tell me, and we'll deal with that one later.
Thank you, Ms. Esther. Alderman Holmes.
Well, I just wanted, when Ms. Esther mentioned the medical marijuana, that on our agenda tonight is a discussion of a possible space. We're not talking about companies or individuals who would be providing, so I would not like to mislead the public in terms of that, because that's not our discussion for tonight. Am I correct? I mean, at least that's what I read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so, yes, Ms. Esther, please come back up.
I appreciate this, and this would be something that the citizen would like to have kind of a dialogue. I know that's not on there, but they need to know that that is part of, when you're looking at a company, are these some of the things that you're going to be looking at? And the people has to know that there's some kind of monitoring, compliance, and everything. Not just rent them a space and they in there.
I understand that, but I just want to be clear about what our agenda is for tonight.
No, I know
And
what
because there will certainly be, I would imagine, based upon some of the feedback that I've had, we'll have lots and lots of discussion.
Well, it wouldn't hurt them to tell us that up front. It gives them
Well,
one.
I don't, if I'm not mistaken, they're not the only people, so I would not just like to have one company, just to hear from one person. We received some information as well in the packet, so you got your packet, you saw that as well. So I, just don't want to mislead anyone.
No, but it would be nice if I'm selling you something, I'm gonna tell you everything and want to make transparent everything I do and
Absolutely.
everything.
You're
So
absolutely
it will
correct.
not hurt them. It might help them, and the others ones. Hopefully, they added that information in the package too.
Hi, Commander Pickett. Did you want to respond at all to any of the police issues that Ms. Esther brought up? And if you,
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not prepared.
that's fine. I
The
just,
chief has been on vacation this is his second week,
great, that's,
so I'm here to talk about the animal shelter update.
that's fine. I just,
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
no, all good.
And I've talked to,
I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Thank you. So any other citizen comment? I know Mr. Kenny, you'll speak later, but I think that's all we have for citizen comment. So we're going to go for items for discussion, human services funding. And as Ms. Esther mentioned, we have talked about having a meeting possibly on September 29th, 2014 to continue discussions about grant funding and having a comprehensive approach to that. Does that work for that date? Look good for you? And Mr. Bobquist, did you want to address this at all? Not to put you on the spot, but you're here. We always like to hear from you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. This has been a topic that this committee has been discussing for the last several months. At your last discussion, you sort of leaned toward the idea of having a larger meeting with this committee, with the Housing Community Development Grant Committee, and with the Mental Health Board. So in looking at the calendar for the fall, there are 5 Mondays in the month of September. I think this type of meeting really lends itself to that kind of Monday night meeting. So we're proposing that we would have that meeting on Monday, September 29th. We would invite the Mental Health Board and the Community and Economic Development Grant Committee. I think we would need to probably do it upstairs in the Parasol room so that we would have room for everyone. And I think we would just have a dialogue with the members of the 3 groups to see, are we doing what we're doing the right way? Are there opportunities for changes? I know this committee has talked about how funding strategies have been done several years back when there was a joint committee that also included funding from United Way. I think it probably would be a good opportunity to talk about that as a potential change to go back to, not for 2015, but for 2016 and beyond. So we're proposing, if it's all right with this group, the September 29th date, and then we'll work with the other groups. I'll probably come back to you at your next meeting as well with an update, but to focus on September 29th.
Great. I have 2 lights, Alderman Holmes and then Alderman Grover.
I just want to know, where does this 29th fall in terms of the budget process? Where are we at about that?
Well, we're about 2 weeks before the budget is released, and I think, as we've talked in previous meetings, we're looking at not 15, we're looking at 16.
Okay.
So this committee's already
Okay.
signed off on a funding amount for the Mental Health Board for 2015. They're in the midst of doing those reviews of applications right now for 2015. So any change, I think, is anticipated would be
2016.
starting in January of 2016.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure about that. Okay.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bobquist. I think the action that this committee has been requested to make is simply to approve the recommendation that we
Direct us
convene
to
these
move forward
groups
with
on
organizing the
September
meeting.
29th. All right, I'll move that we
Great.
set the date September 29th on a Monday to discuss grant funding with the other interested groups.
Thanks.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Did you want to speak?
I did, because
Thank-
I had called the office, and that's not a date that works out, which I told person that I talked to with the leadership of the Mental Health Board.
Okay.
So I said that after the 16th of, through the month of September, from the 16th on, the date would not work out, and I asked specifically if it could, and I think it was, actually, is it Erica? Is that your first name that I spoke with? That was, any other time would be fine.
So anytime after September 16th?
No. Until the 16th of September.
Okay.
And then after the 2nd of October.
And then after the,
As far as the leadership of the board is concerned.
okay. So neither, you can't make it or,
No.
okay.
The 29th.
Or I think,
We're very interested in the
yeah, no.
dialogue.
I know, I think it's extremely important to have the mental health board. Alderman Grover, was this a new light? Okay, thanks.
Just looking at the calendar, the city council's next available, or human services next free Monday would be either our meeting on the 6th, or it would be the 3rd Monday of October, which is the 20th. We don't have another handy 5th Monday, as in September.
Mr. Early,
and-
we had looked internally at some other dates. You don't
Yeah.
happen to have those handy, do you?
Yes, the only options that were going to work for both this committee and the other two committees and the staff were the September 29th date. If we wanted to do a different date, it would have to be later in October as suggested by the resident, and then either that or in place of Human Services in September.
I think what we'll need to do, and I apologize, I had asked the Health Department staff to vet the date
I'm sorry.
2 weeks ago, and I apologize to you and to the members of the Mental Health Board. We had hoped to accomplish it at a time other than right now.
Okay.
All right, then I move we rescind our action, our vote we just did for the September 29th,
Do you have a second?
and
Okay.
and then defer
Thank
to
you.
staff on finding a mutually agreeable time
Thank you.
and date.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, yeah, as we've discussed at our previous meeting and at the Mental Health Board as well, this really needs to be a comprehensive approach, particularly Mental Health Board, as well as many of the not-for-profits that we talked to about being around the table, so, thank you. HH2, citywide grants. Yilda, I think you're up.
Good evening, Chairwoman Burris and members of the Human Services Committee. Elda Capricioso, Assistant to the City Manager. Human Service had made a request to learn more about citywide grants and fundraising activity a couple months ago. And so I was asked to gather some of this information, hopefully help the committee discuss some of the grant and fundraising activity. We will follow up at your next meeting with the fundraising. The grant the memo that's in your packet today details just the information that we gathered with the financial documents regarding grant funding. And just to follow up on Ms. Esther's comments, it looks like there were, in the subtotals, those amounts had not been updated with the recent information. I think the only thing we updated before we submitted this memo was the actual full total between 2009 and 2013. So the subtotal line is off a little bit. I went back and checked my documents, and so I can provide the committee with an updated chart for the next committee meeting. But just some general comments about the research. Over the last 5 years, there was a fair amount of grant activity, roughly $47 million. A couple things contributed to that, such as ARA and the NSP2 funding, both of which will likely not to occur again, at least in the near future. And then overall, it seems as if most departments are actively applying for grants when the opportunities arrive. So I'm available to take any comments from the committee.
Does anybody have any questions about this? Actually, this is an item that I asked to look at because we're trying to leverage our money as best as possible, and particularly with matching grants from city, state sources, possibly even other, private foundations, as well as possibly corporate, and just continuing to look at opportunities that we have to do new projects, programs here without just using taxpayer dollars. I think it's something we need to continue to look at, and we're doing a very good job overall of applying for grants. I know the Parks Department has done a great job of really seeking those. Alderman Holmes.
Just wondering, I know you say you're going to follow up next month with fundraising, but can you give me an idea of what types of fundraising?
So I think the fundraising activity that we're going to look at are private donations that the city accepts for specific projects. And
You mean like the tree, I love the tree?
Exactly, I love trees, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Alderman Grover.
I think it has to be said that not only are we really good at identifying and applying for grants, but in securing the grants. We've been extraordinarily successful. I don't know how you would measure it, either by per capita or as a percentage of our budget over the last 5 years, but we've been really remarkably successful in securing grant funding.
Yeah. And as part of that, the Arlington Lagoon, and one of the things that I've talked to Mr. Bobkowitz about, as well as Mr. McCray, is we need to do a good job of making sure that we're saying, when we talk about the lagoon, we're not just saying the lagoon, we're saying the Arlington Lagoon. And, the Crown Ice Arena was very important to our community. We need to recognize the people that have contributed over and over again, just as a steward of those funds that people are very committed to this community. So thank you. Thanks. So City of Evanston Memorandum of Understanding, HH3. Please come on up.
Good evening, Chairman Burris, members of the committee and city staff. Karen Danzig-Lines from the Evanston Public Library. At the last previous discussion of the Human Services Committee, there was a request to clarify the description of the parking associated with the library, both of which are city assets and will continue to be city assets, and the funding will continue to flow to the city as it always had. And so in Article 3, you'll see a change in language which identifies the parking lot by the PIN numbers associated with that surface lot.
Great. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions?
There's two pin on that because of the sections away.
It's just the way it's sectioned off. There's no PIN number for the lot under the library, separate from the library, but it's identified appropriately as the parking below the library.
Right. Alderman Grover.
What action is required of the committee tonight? Have we already approved this MOU to send it to council, or do we need to do that? I move approval of the memorandum of understanding that we recommend its approval to council.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite. HH4, medical marijuana. Ms. Neiden, welcome.
Okay, good evening, Chair Burris, members of the Human Services Committee. Johanna Neiden, Economic Development Manager for the City of Evanston. So we are here tonight to discuss the medical cannabis dispensary opportunity that's presented itself in Evanston. We're here because Public Act, the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program Act, was signed into law last year, and it allows for the establishment of cultivation centers and medical cannabis dispensaries throughout Illinois. It limits the total number to 60, and that's one dispensary for the entire geographic area that comprises Evanston and the Niles townships. And it's only for patients with a prescription from an ongoing care physician and that have had a documented prior medical relationship with that doctor. So this is a pilot program. It sunsets in 2017 if it's not renewed, and if you've read the several hundred pages of the act and the rules, you'll see that it's pretty well defined in terms of who can do this, how they do this, and the way in which they go about doing this. The applications, there's not a date out. There's still some unknown in terms of timing of everything. So the applications to the state of Illinois for people who want to submit for a dispensary location are due sometime this fall. The state hasn't told anyone when these would be released. They've given a general idea that it would probably be in September, and then there would be a period of review, comments, questions, and then another period by which that entities would have an opportunity to submit their application. And again, the applications that will list the criteria for how people are selected, that will spell it all out in the application that nobody's really seen yet, but we've gleaned a little bit of the general idea of how this would happen based on the rules and regulations that have been put forth by the state. Point of importance is the fact that the limits of the location, and this is statewide, they cannot be within 1,000 feet of the property line of a pre-existing public, private preschool, elementary or secondary school, or daycare center of any type. But then it also cannot be within the dwelling unit, a rooming unit, or a district that's zoned specifically for residential. There's no distance that governs the residential component of the restrictions. It's just the location to the schools or daycare facilities. So in looking in Evanston, that leaves a relatively small area by which they could locate. And then adding on additional regulations, which are regulated by the City of Evanston, we would define this as a medical office, so medical offices can't go in every zoning district. So that really limits the locations as well as available properties. You see from this map, there's a pretty large area over here, but there's not available properties to go and there's not available buildings, and so somebody has to be able to demonstrate in the next 60 days that there's a physical space by which you could locate a dispensary in. So adding those additional limitations, you're really left with just a very small area, and that's the area that we're here to talk about tonight. It's an area that's not within a residential district. It's not within 1,000 feet of an educational facility or a daycare facility, and this area also allows medical office. And there's available property, which are these 3 properties right now. So the one on the left is 1800 Maple Avenue, which is, as everyone knows, the city parking garage, vacant commercial space, about 2,200 square feet, that sat vacant since the late 90s when the garage was built. Then this is 900 Clark here. This is the northern end of the movie theater property that's now owned by McCaffrey Interests. Previously, this was the Arthur Hill real estate office, and since they've sold the property, the new owner doesn't need that as a real estate office. And finally, 1830 Sherman Avenue, which is known locally as the Copycat building, since I don't think Copycat's been in there in several decades, but there's space in that building, and the landlord's willing to negotiate. Here's a few pictures. I think some of you have walked past this space at some point or another. This is the interior of the space. It's very raw. The utilities aren't even brought to the space. They're located in other parts of the building. They would have to be brought to the space. It's a pretty simple box right now. Some of you have asked who, and many of you know who's looked at this space to date. And we've had since 2010, when the Economic Development Office took over managing the potential leasing of this space, we've had several inquiries about the space. I break them into food users and then everybody else. And the food users, we've had several food users over the years come and look at the space, and the short answer is food can't go in here because you have to cook food, you have to vent food. And to vent it, you'd have to do a snake and several right and left turns to get up to ventilate to the roof of the garage. And then you get the concern of about 7 or 8 traps, grease traps that you'd have to clean out, which if you didn't do that, that would create a pretty significant fire hazard on our parking garage. So that food use was pretty much ruled out early on once we figured out that the ventilation would be pretty challenging. We've had some corporate coffee shop type uses that would not require cooking on site, but they've been dismissed on multiple occasions due to the lack of foot traffic, of people not being present. When the corporate entities come out to visit the site, they say, oh, not enough people walking past this site to necessitate us going here. And then we've had a couple non-for-profit users that wanted to go here, but really they can't pay the market rent, and they would need significant build-out support from the city in order to locate in those spaces. We've had a year-round farmers market interest, but again, it's the same concern. They would need a significant amount from the city to support the build-out. And finally, the last one was a retail incubator, which was an idea floated earlier this year. But again, when we started looking at retail partners that would want to locate, they didn't see that there was enough foot traffic in the area to be an attractive location. So getting back to cannabis dispensaries, here are a few examples of spaces that are around the country that have medical cannabis dispensaries. And one of the things that we wanted to stress was that this is really more of a doctor's office. This is not what you would necessarily imagine, what we've seen in other places. These are really doctor's offices. They're upscale, they're well-secured spaces that patients, very ill patients, can come and visit and secure medication. And so this might address Ms. Esther's questions about the rules and regulations. The state will go through 4 major areas to determine if an applicant is suitable for a dispensary. So if five entities decide to apply for this particular location, which is what we're looking to do here, is give a letter of consent that says the City of Evanston as a property owner is willing to lease to a medical marijuana dispensary, there's 4 major areas of review. The suitability of the proposed location, the security and record keeping. This is a demonstrated ability to create a secure space and then also to maintain proper records of who's purchasing from this space. Additionally, applicants' capacity and their operating plan and financials, and their knowledge and experience. A notable piece of the rules for opening a dispensary and applying is that applicants need to demonstrate that they have at least $400,000 in liquid assets. So this isn't somebody just thinking that they want to start a business. This is somebody who's well capitalized, has thought very carefully about what they're going to do, and is financially secure. And then finally, there's other non-required initiatives, but that will add to this point system that we understand will be the way in which they'll evaluate. And that includes several things that are labor and employment practices, community benefits, substance abuse prevention, environmental plan. And when we've talked to a handful of these dispensaries that are seeking to locate in 1800 Maple, several of them have touched on these pieces of additional non-required initiatives that they want to utilize in their application, in their commitment to this field. So again, the application has not been released, but we know through the rules and the Public Act that these are things that they'll be looking for. So what we're asking tonight is a recommendation. Sure.
So they're going to be looking for minority owners, women owners, veteran owners?
So what we understand is that those are ways to secure additional points in your application. So those, if you're maybe not as strong in one of the areas, the four major areas, or everyone is strong on all of those four major areas, these are ways that people can put themselves over to the higher points.
Alderman Grover has a question as well.
I don't know how much of an expert you are, Ms. Knighton, on medical marijuana dispensaries, but will the state mostly regulate operations of the dispensaries? City will have very little to do with
That's
their
correct.
regulation.
That's correct. We'll have virtually no regulation of the operations of these facilities.
City's role will be in, obviously, the zoning. In this case, if this
Landlord.
location works out a landlord, so it's a landlord-tenant relationship, taxing authority, and then what other ways would a city get involved?
Well, I understood that, Alderman Grover, it's just that she stopped at substance abuse, and I just wanted to make sure that the public knew the rest of it as well. So that was the
yeah.
reason for my question. I understand it. I read it all. Thank
Actually,
you.
my question was separate, Alderman Holmes, of your good question, which is really what would the city's involvement be in this?
So we would have no
Sounds like-
involvement in the application.
As a landlord.
In the application and the
Correct.
operations and regulation of the dispensary is as a medical office or whatever it's.
Right. We would have no, as far as my understanding of the law, that there's nothing that we would have to go and inspect other than a construction site that would be, a permit would be pulled that we would have to inspect the electrical or plumbing. But on an ongoing past the final certificate of occupancy being issued, there's no regulation
City
from
doesn't.
local.
So it would be just like any other business coming in, occupying our space as a potential tenant.
Correct.
Right.
Alderman Fisk?
Okay.
All right, so tonight we're looking at a letter to offer contingent lease, which would essentially indicate that that the city of Evanston, as the landlord in this particular circumstance, is consenting to offering this space. They would be individually addressed to each applicant to the state license board and would say that we're willing to negotiate a lease for the space if that particular entity was selected. It doesn't obligate us to execute a lease, but it indicates that we're willing to talk about that.
Ms. Knight, state law says nothing about the identity of potential landlords or owners of the properties that would house a medical marijuana dispensary.
Not that I'm aware of.
The Illinois law didn't speak to that.
I think that will be addressed in their suitability of the proposed location. So I think that's a little bit of where it comes into to play. Okay. And then just wanted to cover the timeline to be clear about where tonight stands in relation to everything else. We're anticipating that the application will be released at some time in September, and then there'll be a period of comment, then a period of application period, at which point we would have a better sense of who is submitting to seek to have a dispensary in the 1800 Maple space. At that point, we're not sure how long that the application would be reviewed, and at what point people would be notified that they have received a dispensary license. If in the event that there is one selected for Evanston and the 1800 Maple location is one, then we would look to do lease negotiations, and that could be anytime late fall or early winter. And then
Alderman Grove, do you want,
Yeah,
I know that
actually,
you're waiting.
This is kind of
but
related.
she- okay.
Are we
Oh,
obligated
sorry.
to issue this letter to any entity that expresses an interest, every entity? That is, once we decided to go ahead and issue the letter, we can't determine then who gets the letter, who doesn't.
Well, I think
Or is there-
that's something that's open for discussion here. If this group wants to recommend to City Council to put additional requirements on potential applicants for the medical marijuana dispensary license. We also don't have any, the bigger issues, we don't have any obligation to lease or negotiate beyond the selection.
Do you want to go now, Alderman Braithwaite?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
a quick question, and just a follow-up to Alderman Grover, because that's part of the process that I was trying to understand. Will they need a letter in order to, as part of their application process, or would our letter come after the company has been awarded?
Our letter is part of their application.
Okay, so then,
They have to, because part of the application, they have to demonstrate that they have a security plan, operational plan, that this space is sufficient enough to house what the different components of their dispensary would be. So they can't just say, oh, it's going to be somewhere in Evanston in these 3 properties. They have to say, this is the spot, and the landlord has said that they would lease.
so then will part of our discussion this evening be to determine how many letters will be written, or what's the criteria beyond what we've read in the packet for the city manager to issue that letter?
I think that's up to the
That's right, yeah.
committee.
That's what's the conversation is.
Yeah. So,
That's
we,
I think there's another discussion.
Right.
Right. Oh,
Right.
definitely.
so I have, Alderman Fisk, do you want to, are you still waiting? Yes? I'm ready to go. Okay, good, all right. Well, you said I just didn't want to,
I have one more slide, 2 more slides. I think.
okay. Then I'll go to Tendem and then Alderman Holmes. I didn't want to jump over you, but you're still okay.
If I'm remembering this correctly, we did talk about bringing this space up to a white box at one time, but obviously haven't done anything. I'm glad we haven't. Is it important to spell that out before we become a landlord to let interested parties know exactly what we're willing to do and not do as far as spending our money on this space? Or is that something we can wait on? I mean, it seems like it might figure into their budgets as well.
When we've talked to several of these companies, we've indicated that we have that in the city budget, we've been very transparent. The city budget has $150,000 in the parking fund to help build out this space. Part of the challenge of the space has been the cost to build it out is pretty significant. And we've also been very clear that we've sought a market rent for this space. We're not willing to give a rent reduction, particularly because our commitment to the downtown property owners and real estate community, we don't want to be, this is a prime space, that we don't want to be offering a reduced rate of rent for a space.
Alderman Fisk, yes, no?
I'll just
You're
comment
up.
on that. I'm not ready to. I'm
Okay.
not ready to go through my list yet.
Okay.
But I'll just comment on that space, and that is the space is desirable because it is in the condition that it's in, which allows for flexibility in locating bathrooms, kitchens, electrical, plumbing, whatever. So we've made good decisions not to move ahead
Yes.
with the space. And
Absolutely.
so-
Well, and I can tell you from the different users, even if the ventilation for the food wouldn't have worked, each would have designed the space in a very different way and put the bathrooms on one side versus, and that's, some of those things are simple to move, but others are not.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Alderman Holmes, and I'm going to come back to you when Johanna's done. Okay. Alderman Holmes?
Because I'm still stuck on the question that Alderman Grover asked, because if I read in, what I read in the memorandum is that it would be for all interested parties. So, I mean, the letter that or that we authorize the city manager to do could be given to anyone who's applying. That all we're saying is that our space is available.
Right.
Okay, so it could go to 10 people if 10 people want to apply. Is that, am I understanding it
Right.
correctly?
Mr. Falkowitz?
I think that was our initial plan coming into this evening, that this is not a selection that we would ultimately make. This community is competing with other communities in Niles Township, which is Skokie and Niles and at Lincolnwood. So there are other communities looking at this, and Alderman Fisk had a list of questions she sent me last night, and I looked through, did quite a bit of searching, and communities all over Illinois are having very similar discussions. And I think my thought on this was we should first decide if this is something that makes sense for Evanston and deal with that first, and then look at what makes sense as far as any additional conditions. Quite honestly, I don't think we really have the luxury of putting that many additional conditions on this. But the state of Illinois has quite an extensive process they're about to go through, and my recommendation would be that the committee recommend to the full city council that we make that letter available to interested parties, and then that'll be up to the state of Illinois ultimately then to decide what makes the most sense. I think, and one last comment, Chair Burris, members of the committee, I think in reading what other firms are doing, and many of these firms are talking to many communities, they want to make themselves stand out, and they are going to, as part of their applications, try to show how they best fit in the communities. And so we will continue to work, if the council wishes to go down this road, we'll continue to work with them to say, this is how you would best fit into Evanston. And if there are opportunities, I think the local employment program, are there opportunities for these firms to employ local Evanston residents through this? Is there some sort of training programs? I think all those issues would be something we would talk further with these interested parties and encourage them as part of their application to the state of Illinois to put some of those aspects in. And again, in reading the press coverage of other communities having these discussions, these firms, some here tonight, others have represented to other city councils that they're perfectly willing to do that. So I think that would be a discussion. We did not want to get ahead of the city council on this matter. We first felt it was appropriate to come with the letter that Ms. Neiden has discussed this evening. If you do wish to go down that road, then there's certainly lots of additional discussion that we would have.
Okay, you have one more slide? Great. And then we'll go to Alderman Fisk.
And then, as a home rule community, we have the opportunity to tax what is sold at this site, any site, not just the one that we would own. And we did some preliminary projections based on a 4% tax, which is similar to other communities, as you saw in the memo, that we could generate between $20,000 and even $200,000 a year. I mean, it's a pretty broad range, given that there's not a whole market study conducted on these. There's a very few dispensaries that have seen a long-term, that a market analyst would prefer to be able to say, here are the solid numbers that a market like this, comparable to Evanston, would perform in. So you have conservative and very broad numbers here.
Great. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Johanna, could you go back to the slide at the beginning, of the 1,000-foot slide?
This one?
No, not the photo, not the map, but the one right before it. Okay, so my question on this is, if this use is located, does that mean within 1,000 feet, if someone comes in and wants to open a preschool, elementary, secondary school, or daycare center, daycare home, all those facilities, does that mean they would be precluded from doing that?
I see Michelle searching a point of the law, but I believe I looked at this because somebody else had the same question, and it's a pre-existing.
Okay.
So at the time of application for the license, that if this is the way that the layout of schools and daycare centers are, it wouldn't preclude somebody from having to move if one came in later.
Okay, because we're building out a lot of our downtown for residential. And even though it's not zoned residential, in fact, it is residential. And I wouldn't want to, again, preclude any kind of, support services for families or individuals because of this use. Some other questions that I had about this came from reading and Googling on the internet some areas of Illinois where medical marijuana is being grown. In Peru, Illinois, I guess they have several different companies that are wanting to purchase space to grow marijuana, which, again, is fine. But it raised some questions for me about not only the who's growing, but the quality, how it's dispensed, and all of that. How it's regulated, if it's regulated, and that all of this is contrary to federal law. So I'm wondering how appropriate it is for us as a municipality to be renting, even though state law will allow it for 4 years, how appropriate it is for us to be renting for a use that is contrary to federal law? And can we offer to build out and give a lease for longer than 4 years when the sunset provision is 4 years? In 4 years, this may be illegal in Illinois. I mean, most likely it will be continued, but it may be illegal in Illinois. So, I mean, these are things that I think we need to, be thinking about when we're considering this kind of a use. The other questions that I had is what forms medical marijuana take. It sounded to me like the folks in the businesses in Peru that were processing the marijuana, it was very difficult to tell what strengths it was. There seemed to be some ambiguity about that. I'm just curious about who determines that, because pretty much if it's not a regulated drug, for lack of a better term, how do we know what's being prescribed? I guess we rely on the individuals that are actually coming with the application, and we're going to have to rely on the state to make that determination, so that when someone comes to us, we just assume that that's all okay.
And Alderman Fisk, members of the committee, I think it's important, again, to reinforce that we have no regulatory authority. Other than the location of it, the operation is all under the auspices of the state of Illinois. I think the number, Michelle, was 21 states, 23 states in the District of Columbia, 23 including the District of Columbia, have done this and are moving forward with this. So our role is only a land use role. It is a unique opportunity. As you raised over the weekend, Alderman Fisk, I was unable to find any other municipality that would be participating as a landlord in this. We did find some municipalities in southern Illinois which are working on the growing piece of this, and there's at least one that's looking to put one in a TIF district and would have a TIF dollars available, and then another county in southern Illinois is looking at selling some land that it owns. But in looking at the dispensaries around the country, we're not able to find another community that would rent space.
The reason why I'm asking is that I hear what you say, but as we know, when there's a problem and someone's looking to assess liability, they're going to be looking at us as well if there's any kind of a problem with this business. And we can say to the business, we have absolutely no exposure, but we know that doesn't. In all practicality, that's not the case.
And Alderman Fisk, members of the committee, I think that is a question here, that we look to other states of the United States that have done this. We have not found in our review any of those issues that have come up. That doesn't mean something won't happen in another community tomorrow. But I think the reality is that the state of Illinois is moving forward with this, that they are looking to disperse these operations in different parts of Illinois. There is an opportunity for that, for this business to be in Evanston. We think we have a very unique opportunity given the location of the map. 98% of commercial properties in Evanston are ineligible to host this. So in that small bit that is eligible, we happen to have a property that we have over the long period of time not been able to fill. So from my perspective, this was too good an opportunity not to pursue, but with any opportunity, there are pluses and minuses, and it's really up to this committee and the full city council to decide this. If we are not a landlord, there are, again, a handful of other places in Evanston that may work. If they do not work, then this business will likely go elsewhere, somewhere in Niles Township. So we're just here because we think that the experience of other jurisdictions around the United States has not been negative. We've not really been able to find any. There are some states that have had difficulty coming to the point of the regulation and have changed regulation over time. But of those that are moving forward, there have not been major issues. So we feel pretty confident that if the council wanted to pursue this, it is a unique location that we have. It is away from all of the areas that most communities are most concerned about. It just seems like this is something worth at least going to the next step by making our willingness known to these folks that this would be something we could
Right,
do.
and my questions have nothing to do with the benefits of medical marijuana at all.
No, and my
It's just
response is very pragmatic. As your city manager, here's a business that wants to locate in Evanston, and also happens to want to locate in the one commercial space we own that we've been unable to fill. So,
Now,
from a pure economic development standpoint, this is something that's interesting.
The other point that was raised in the Peru article, and I don't remember the name of the paper serving the Illinois Valley.
There are 4 or 5, I think, that serve the greater Peru area, but
Well, I'm sure they're all doing a great job. Was the suggestion that there was going to be research with Northwestern University on establishing medical marijuana?
we have
Do
found
we know
some-
anything about have there been any discussions between
I've
City of
spent
Evanston
more of
and
the last
Northwestern?
24 hours on that question, Alderman Fisk, than anything else in my day to day. And MedFarm is the company that is mentioned in the article, which I don't believe the rest of the council has seen, but from the Peru, Illinois, and they have partnered with one faculty member at the School of Medicine, a Dr. Richard Miller, who is a PhD, not an MD, apparently. And that individual is helping to, with the further study of scientific cannabis for therapeutic treatment for serious medical conditions. And the MedFarm has indicated that they're going to contribute 1% of their gross revenues to fund special research. So I also been in touch with the provost at Northwestern, who was unaware of any of this.
Okay.
But Mr. Zalmazak has had contact with MedFarm, and they have that information available. So
Okay.
I think this is an instance of one individual affiliated with the Feinberg School entering into a relationship there. We're unaware of anything more further than that.
Okay, because the reference was Northwestern University, not an individual
And
faculty
of the
member.
5 Greater Peru newspapers,
Yes.
I'm not sure if we had a good one or a bad one as far as their coverage. So
Okay, and just again, the products that we're talking about are marijuana itself in a tobacco type of form, candy.
our understanding is that
oral spray,
it could be a variety of different
brownies.
things.
Okay,
But again,
a
this is
variety
all
of
by
things.
prescription. It's not a matter of
Okay.
people coming up and looking at the rack.
Right.
You know, as one might see, you know, in Washington State and in Colorado, where it's
Right.
made available for other purposes.
Okay. Alderman Fisk, do you have any more questions? Probably, but I don't have to say
Okay.
now. Thanks.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding about the Illinois laws, it's a rather strict regulation of medical marijuana compared to other states that have been way ahead of us on allowing the medical use of marijuana. And I'm assuming, too, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bobkowitz, but any lease that we would undertake for the space on Maple Avenue would have the same terms as any other lease that we would have for, as to provisions for liability.
Absolutely.
And so
And Alderman Fisk-
it would be a contract. It would simply be a contract that we would.
And Alderman Fisk raises the issue of term, which is a really interesting one, because on the one hand, would we want to limit it based on the current term of the Illinois law, or would we say renter beware? And enter into perhaps a longer lease, and if for some reason that goes away, then the city would still have the benefit of rent for the balance of that term. So
I think that speaks to build-out costs.
certainly,
And-
and I again, we are looking at this primarily as an economic development opportunity, and I think that that plays into that we would want to make sure that if we're going to participate in the build-out costs, as Ms. Knight mentioned, we have $150,000. That number could go up, number could go down, but as we would for if this was a coffee shop or a restaurant, those are all factors we would take in the term of the lease. So it would be the lease or beware as far as the 4-year term that the state of Illinois is currently obligated.
Alderman Holmes?
I would imagine that whoever's going to lease it also would be looking at that and would want to negotiate it. So I don't think it would just be our choice of extending it. You know, they'd have to first want to have an extension or would want a longer lease. So
I mean, you know, we've, as Ms. Knight has mentioned, Mr. Zalmazak, who's sitting quietly here, but he has done a lot of the, he was the smart one of the three of us, of course.
He's a smart guy over there, be quiet.
You know, we've had a lot of folks come to us about this. I think there's a general feeling that this is a good business opportunity for those folks who are interested in going into this business in Illinois. So we're not concerned that whoever is selected by the state will not have wherewithal because they will have an opportunity to have hopefully a profitable business themselves. So again, this is all a dollars and cents equation from our perspective and quite honestly from the applicants that may move forward. So I think it just makes sense if Evanston can be part of this and it can meet the community standards. Your staff feels it's reasonable to pursue it.
Right. Any other questions? Right. Then we have one citizen comment. And I'm not sure what capacity if you're in your nighttime or your daytime capacity, so I wasn't sure how to address you, but Mr. Canning?
Daytime capacity.
Okay.
So, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Christopher Canning, and I am here representing a name you've just heard, the Med Farm, which is a brand operator of medicinal cannabis cultivation centers and dispensary operations seeking to open a dispensary location in Evanston. Now, Alderman Fisk, I want to introduce you to Mr. Jeff Bessler. He is the CEO. The reason I want to introduce you is because he's going to the town hall meeting in Peru, Illinois tomorrow. So whether on the record or off the record.
Where is Peru, Illinois, by the way?
On Highway 39.
Yes.
Okay.
South, about 50 miles south of Rochelle.
And with him is Joe Dooley, who is the Director of Sales. My comment simply for the committee is these gentlemen are available if you wanted to have any further questions, either on the record or off the record, that you were asking Mr. Bobkowitz. There was also a question about Northwestern, and I want to just be very clear. The Med Farm has partnered with Richard J. Miller, who is the Alfred Newton Richards Professor at the Feinberg Northwestern University Medical School, Department of Molecular Pharmacology and Biological Chemistry, to do research, as well as David Victorson, PhD, who is the Associate Professor, Department of Medical Social Sciences, Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, and full member Robert H. Laurie Comprehensive Cancer Center. And the reason I bring those two gentlemen up is we're talking about particular locations, but I think for the committee, you might want to know why Evanston. And I want to tell you why the Med Farm thinks Evanston's important, because what Med Farm's trying to do, in addition to having cultivation centers, as well as the dispensary operations, is what they're trying to do is bring a professionalism to this industry that we don't think exists. But what they're also seeking to do is do scientific research of the plant's cannabinoids. So the Med Farm is making a significant investment in an in-house lab to develop medicines fit for use, which are appropriate to each of the 41 patient conditions which are allowed under Illinois' program. So Illinois is very different than other states because not only is it a very regulated industry, but it's regulated down to 41 specific conditions, not just like other states where it's pain, whatever pain means. So that's why the Med Farm has already reached out to these two individuals to start doing a research program, and they've agreed to partner to do both a research partnership as well as a patient-reported outcome study with Dr. Victorson. And so those studies are dependent on patient interface through the company dispensaries. So what we're here to do tonight is to say we are in support of the resolution, whether it is to be given to all or any and all folks who want to go into the business here in Evanston. If Alderman Holmes, there's going to be another process where you select one, we'd like to participate in that as well. But the bottom line from the Med Farm is we appreciate the city of Evanston and we appreciate the excellent staff work that's been done. You are a community that actually understands what the issue is, fully understand what the role of the state is, what the role of the city is, and we are just seeking to be here tonight to hear the discussion and tell you this is potential applicant, someone who wants to do business in the city of Evanston. We support the resolution, would ask that the committee advances onto the city council. And as I said, Mr. Bessler, Mr. Dooley are here to answer any questions either on the record or off the record. And if you need to see the letters from the two gentlemen at Northwestern, again, those can be made available either on the record or off the record. So at the discretion of the chair, and if there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Alderman Fisk?
I sort of have a question.
And is it directed towards me or to one of the other gentlemen?
To you. I guess I'm thinking about why is it that you have to have an individual office, and do you ever envision this being like part of CVS or OSCO? I mean, going through a regular prescription process? I mean, what's the difference between medical marijuana and over-the-counter pain medication? And
well, I think
that places you in a position of possibly being taxed. And where's the medicine line here?
Well, we're dealing with a situation what the state is regulating us to do. And the state has made a determination that we are not, as the staff memo points out, we are not a medicine based on their analysis that is exempt from taxation. So therefore, as the staff memo points out, because we are exempt, or not exempt, I should say, we can be taxed. In terms of location, again, the state regulation says where these locations need to be. And as Manager Bobquist pointed out, there's only 2% within the city of Evanston where these can be. And as the staff deck showed, there were only 3 locations, 3 buildings in downtown Evanston where this could be located.
In order to be packaged and be in a regular pharmacy or on the shelves of a pharmacy, like aspirin or something like that, and I'm sorry, this is not an area that I'm familiar with at all. Do you have to have federal approval? And is that, do you ever foresee that happening? Yeah, I don't want to carry this too far. It's just it's something that I'm trying to figure out why.
I'd rather defer to someone who can answer your question directly, so let me turn it over to Mr. Dooley.
Thank you. As you stated earlier, it is a Schedule I drug, so they won't allow it in a regular pharmacy to be. It's not regulated by the FDA.
Okay, so that's the difference, is that it has to be FDA approved.
Yes.
Okay. Do you envision that ever happening?
We hope so. We hope that eventually that the federal government, when I say we, not only the Med Farm, I think everybody in the medical cannabis industry hopes that they reduce it from being a Schedule I drug to being a drug with health benefits at a federal level, and then it could be sold more widely in pharmacies.
So at some point in the future, there may not be any need for a separate type of an office like this. We may just go to CVS or Costco or somewhere.
Maybe in the future,
Walgreens.
yes.
Okay.
That's possible.
Do you have any idea how long in the future? Not 4 years.
It depends how long. It's all about enlightenment. I think that when people see the help that this provides to the patients, spinal cord injury, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, some of the diseases that are listed, and see the benefit of their family members with cancer and HIV/AIDS, the pressure, the political pressures will come upon the federal government to reduce it and make it a more available drug, not a Schedule I drug with no medical benefit.
Has anyone applied for FDA approval?
They won't apply for FDA approval because it's still a Schedule I drug. What has happened politically is that the Congress has taken away the funding from the DEA to go after medical cannabis. So the Drug Enforcement Agency will not prosecute or go after medical cannabis. The DEA has also asked that it be reduced off the list of Schedule I drugs, because if it's a drug with medical benefit, it should not be on that list. And there's also political pressures from several senators and House members doing the same thing. I mean, if you watch sort of Rand Paul is on this topic, but there are lots of people trying to get it taken off the Schedule I list. But when that will happen is anybody's guess.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that. Is part of the FDA approval with clinical trials? Do you know of anything going on around clinical trials with medical marijuana?
The clinical trials, right now the federal government has, there's one strain in Mississippi where they're allowing them to grow and do trials, and it's very limited. So, and then no pharmaceutical company wants to develop a drug because they can't get FDA approval and they won't do the research. So it's a very difficult thing. That's why people are trying to get it reduced off the Schedule I as a drug. What we want to do is have Dr. Miller and his team research the strains that we're going to have from our cultivation centers for specific use, and then do research on the patient outcome from our database to make sure it's working for those uses. We do know that certain strains work on pain, some work on anxiety, some work on nausea, some work on anorexia associated with cancer. We know those strains. We want to make sure we can improve on those, find new uses for various things that people present with, and make sure we've got the best combinations. THC is the one that's one of the psychotropic part of the drug, is what they're finding is with less THC and more cannabinoid, it can control things like seizure without any sort of a high. So that's just one example, because all of us, everybody sitting on the dais here, have endogenous cannabinoids in your body right now. It's part of our makeup. They're in your immune system and in your neurotransmitters in your nervous system. That's where they exist, and that's what you're doing with these medicines, is helping those immune systems and nervous system functions operate properly. It's a very interesting ways.
And I'm assuming that the faculty members have IRB approval as well, so they already have approval from a source to do this with human subjects.
Are you talking? Who are you asking about? The
research that you're conducting now, correct? That you will do. Thank you.
And the reason it's called patient outcome is we're not doing research on human subjects. Like, let's go give this person a drug. What we're doing is collecting through a database their outcome. They're choosing to take certain drugs for their condition, and then they will report and collect a database how it's working, and then we will be able to, for the first time, have human studies on how they're working.
Right, but you're still dealing with human subjects in some way.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm putting out there are approval mechanisms through IRB that are important to say that those are. That's all I'm.
I understand, but it's just different than doing these patient-controlled studies where you sign people up to come in and try drugs. Yep, got it.
I'm well aware of it, thank you. But I just want to make sure, to make sure where we were on these two subjects. And I got a saying that others might be that weren't here to sign up for citizen comment that may want to sign up after Mr. Canning. Let me know when you're finished.
Just one last clarification to Alderman Braithwaite's question, and similar to Alderman Holmes. In the regulations, it states that if the property is not, and this is the application process, if the property is not owned by the applicant, a written statement from the property owner and landlord, if any, certifying consent that the applicant may operate a dispensary on the premises. So that's why the idea of a letter we support, because then it can be part of the application process, and then it can be sent to the state. As this slide shows, it doesn't obligate the city. In a perfect world, that would be more certainty, but at least it meets the regulations. So that's why this issue comes up now in the process rather than later in the process. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. And again, if there's any questions, Mr. Bessler, Mr. Dooley are available later if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi. Can you just please state your name and your address, as usually what we do?
Thank you so much for convening on this matter. It's very important to us. My name is Brathella Quick. I live at 606D South Boulevard here in Evanston, and I'm representing MedMar Dispensary of Evanston. Even before the law came out, I was very interested in this endeavor. And what I wanted to bring tonight is that there's not really 3 locations that are suitable. It's really just that one. I've looked at buildings probably for the past 6 months or more, and though they were in the orange zone, they didn't pan out. So it dwindled down to the 3 that you had on the board. However, 900 Clark Street is absolutely not available. The landlords decided that they did not want to use it to pioneer this movement, to quote them. The Copycat building is in a basement level, and it's kind of wet, and that's a live product. So we want to protect that. So your property is really the only property. And that's really all the comment I wanted to make. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Did anybody else want to speak that hasn't signed up on this? Hi, come on up.
My name is John Sullivan, and I'm actually from Orland Park, 18135 Turtle Run Court in Orland Park, Illinois. But I represent another medical cannabis company that's here tonight that is also interested in the city of Evanston. I won't debate the merits of our group. It's certainly not why you're here tonight, but I will tell you that we consist of an MD and pharmacists and also law enforcement professionals that want to see this happen in Illinois and happen the right way. And we're very excited about the possibility here in Evanston because I've spoken to numerous communities throughout the state. And what you're finding is kind of a mixed bag of reactions. There are some communities that are reacting with fear, quite frankly, and they're zoning it so that you can only open a dispensary in an industrial district or some far outreach of their town, which, quite frankly, the way the state has regulated medical cannabis here, it is so restrictive that what you're talking about is basically sending the elderly and very sick children into the industrial sections of town to go and buy what ultimately is a drug that could at least better, if not save their lives in many cases. So it's an important issue, and really Evanston has a unique opportunity here with your location and your property with the right group to really be at the forefront of this. Our group, too, plans on doing quite a bit of research. We have pharmacists, like I said, that are part of the actual group that is incorporated that are going to be doing very similar studies to what they talked about. So it's really a serious thing. It's critical that people be able to receive this. I mean, it's life-saving for some children. Governor Quinn just signed a bill in Illinois allowing for children who need this drug to get it. So it's an exciting time. And it's a necessary thing, and we really want to just come here tonight to encourage you to support the opportunity to locate here, and we hope you'll do that for the companies that are in competition, because it will be highly regulated and very competitive, as you can see, to get any of these licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. So any other comments, questions, discussion from the committee? Alderman Tendam.
Well, I'd like to thank the staff for putting all this information together. I know we've been working on this a long time, and it is there's a lot to learn about there, and I think things are changing, especially with our legislature. Things are being modified, changed, refined. But I'm encouraged by what we have found so far, and with some of the groups that have presented to us, certain members on the council. My thought has always been that if someone's going to open it up, why not us? If there's some money to be made, that's really would be my motivation. And I do support the use of medical marijuana, but I think as far as a city alderman, it's the tax money and that. And renting a space that we've had no luck in renting for many, many years. So it's a good revenue option for us. It's also, I'd like to really sort of hype the building a little too, because it's a good location. It's somewhat isolated in its immediate surroundings, and it has enclosed parking. I think it's a great location too. So I'm hoping that it works out, and if it's done right, I think it'll be really terrific.
Alderman Grover?
And it's accessible. It's accessible space. I want to put a motion on the floor here, and I'll recommend, I'll move adoption of Resolution 59R14, authorizing our city manager to execute letters of contingent lease approval for that city-owned property at 1800 Maple Avenue.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, Alderman Host?
You said letters, right? Letters. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
It's just as set forth in the memorandum, Alderman.
Just as it says in the memorandum to us. I just want to be real clear about that.
Okay.
Go out to everyone who requests it
Absolutely, yes, please.
without any discrimination. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, I do not see any further lights. I didn't see any further.
I snuck in there. Again, I spoke with the city manager about this, just as long as we have language in there that protects the city from any potential liability.
Okay. Hi. You don't have a light. So.
Good evening, Madam Chair. As the lease drafter for the city, I will ensure that the liability language is strong.
Great, thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Fantastic. Moving along. HH5, Evanston Animal Shelter update. I do not have any citizen comment on this piece. If somebody wants to comment on it, please let me know.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is James Pickett. I'm a commander with the Evanston Police Department's Community Strategies Division. And I've been tasked with also heading or working as a liaison between the animal shelter and staff. So I just want to give a brief update on our status of the animal shelter, especially going back to May 9th, 2014, when, as we all know, CARE and the city severed their ties. Okay, as of today's date, August 4th, 172, and I have plus 15, and I'll explain that in a minute. 172 plus 15 citizens have contacted me directly with interest in volunteering their services or continuing to volunteer their services at the shelter. There has been an estimated 70 new volunteers that have been trained at the shelter. And the reason why I put that plus 15, 172, I received 172 emails personally to me about volunteering. Plus 15 is just an example because just last week, I had another group from Northwestern, one person emailed me for 15 other people. So it's sort of hard to estimate exactly how many volunteers have come through the system, but I would like to say well over 200. But like I said, 70 new volunteers have been trained. The storage area located behind the shelter, and I know we have talked about this before, has been completely cleaned out, making it possible for animal behavior assessments to take place there. As far as the animal adoptions, they have been proceeding accordingly. Presently, there are 12 cats and 6 dogs housed at the shelter. Additionally, since May 9, 2014, 19 cats and 13 dogs have been successfully adopted out of the shelter. 11 cats and 6 dogs have been fostered, and 2 cats and 5 dogs have been sent to rescues. So the volunteers are really keeping up with trying not to house animals too long. I know the goal was, I think like 20 days, 20 to 30 days. So on average, they've been staying about 20 days. The dates have been set for shelter members to be Safer Behavioral Assessment certified through ASPCA, which stands for the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Chief Animal Warden Linda Teckler and volunteers Lisa Kaplan, Vicki Pacinko, and Kathy Roberts will travel to Milwaukee, Wisconsin from October 14th through the 16th to receive the initial training given by the Wisconsin Humane Society. After this initial phase of training, a SAFER certified trainer will travel to Evanston from Minnesota at a date to be determined in order to complete the official training. The official Board of Animal Control has been appointed, and as of today's date, we've had 3 meetings. The board consists of Meredith Reeves, who will serve as chair, Jill Cabot, who will serve as vice chair, Alderman Jane Grover, who will serve as the board's secretary. Other members include Alderman Judy Fisk, Ruth Ann, and I want to pronounce her name right, Ruth Haddish, and Diane Valletta. Generally, the board shall review monthly reports from the volunteer animal organization once that's named, and the chief animal warden in order to set priorities and give feedback to the council related to issues regarding animal control and the city animal shelter. The board will be responsible for coordinating fundraising efforts for the animal shelter fund. And also today, the board met with 3 volunteers in order to get their opinions on how the shelter has been running and what are some of the things needed in order to keep things running efficiently. And we've gotten favorable comments from the volunteers about how things have progressed since May 9th. They described just how good the volunteers have been, and things are going accordingly. Of course, things can also be better, but things have been going pretty well. And also, I just want to remind everybody about the adoption hours of the shelter. They will continue to be Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., Saturdays and Sundays from 12 p.m. to 3:30 p.m., and no adoption activities will take place on Wednesday. And I just want to end by saying that publicly, I would like to really commend the volunteers. I'm in contact with them pretty regularly. Now, I've said it privately to them, but publicly, I would really like to say we have really appreciated the efforts, considering this is volunteering. This is not their job. They have jobs, they have other responsibilities, families, but they have really made a good difference with animal shelter. So I'm really positive about how things are progressing.
Alderman Fisk.
And Commander Pickett, I know that they appreciate you. I think it's been hard for any citizen to learn the ins and outs of the bureaucracy as it is, but they have always said to me what a nice working relationship they have. And for those of you who didn't hear at the meeting today, it was reported that 5 cats were adopted over the weekend, which is great. Right. And so instead of a holding facility, we're really becoming an adoption center that's working. So thank you so much for your help and support.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? Great.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I think we are at adjournment, unless there are any other items for discussion?
Second.
I don't know which one got it first. All those in favor? Aye.